it's not lost on me that it's actually like halfway through 2024, although it is a bit surprising to think that that's where we're at. Hi, I'm Tim. Nice to meet you guys. Talk to some of you, recognize some of you, have no idea who some of you are. All wonderful things. I've been doing this for a while, working in the marketing space. I am passionate about the intersection of technology, people, and messaging, if you will. So really love working in this area. Had an agency for like 8 years, grew that, experienced COVID, decided to separate myself from that agency and sold it about this time last year. And I'm currently just running a smaller shop called Frank. So I'm not the reason that you're here. The reason that you're here is to talk about trends. The format that I kind of want to use, just so that we have a little bit of structure, is I'm going to talk about 3 different trends today. And I wanted to try to deviate as much as possible as what you can find just by like typing in Google, because there's nothing that marketers love more than creating blog posts and articles about marketing trends. I highly encourage you, if you want to dive deeper into this overall subject matter, just to Google 2024 marketing trends. And then if you really want to entertain yourself, Google 2021 marketing trends and compare the list and laugh as you realize that they're probably kind of the same half the time. Anyways, that's my tangent, and also just a little bit of context. We're going to talk about these trends, and then I'm going to specifically talk to you about how they impact different characters in the professional space. And just because it's summer, I'm going to highlight how for some of those characters it's creating sunshine, and for some of those characters it might be creating some rain. Not that rain is a bad thing, but out where I live, it's all about beach days right about now. So rain is usually not my favorite. The first trend that I want to unpack, I'm going to call getting gigalicious. Not to be confused with gigolo-icious or jello-icious or anything else. Gigalicious. So the shift to the gig economy, which I think all of us at this point experience in some way, shape, or form on a daily or at least a weekly basis. Simplest example, just in case it's helpful, food being delivered to me by Uber Eats at 3 in the morning when I'm hungry. That is a gig worker. And a gig worker, as you may or may not know, is usually being paid via a 1099. They're not usually receiving any benefits. They are technically an independent contractor or a sole proprietor under the eyes of the tax law. And there's a very, very, very dramatic continuing shift in the marketing, technology, and creative space to the gig economy. I would go so far as to say that it is really the future of the marketing, technology, and creative space. In probably the next few years, it'll continue to trend to the point where it actually overtakes full-time work. And by that, I mean there will be more individuals in that space working as a 1099 or a gig contractor than there will be getting paid full-time, which is a pretty big shift for a variety of reasons. Let's unpack that with a few characters in mind. So the first character I want to think about is just the freelancer. Maybe you're a freelancer. Maybe you have a full-time job and you're doing some freelance work on the side. Technically, anyone getting paid as a 1099 contractor could consider themselves a freelancer. Freelancers are on one hand, this trend is really exciting, right? Because I have complete control over my work format. Hypothetically, I have the power to do the things that I want to do and say no to the things that I don't want to do. I get to help organizations or individuals without being contractually obligated to them past a temporary time period. There's a lot of benefits, especially on the independent side. I have been a freelancer in one way, shape, or form for about 12 years now. And I don't know that I could ever really work differently now that I've done it this way for so long. However, there are also some challenges for the freelancers. And the one that I would say is most relevant to the marketing, technology, creative space is oversaturation of available talent, which is just a really fancy way of saying there are a lot of people right now who want to be in marketing, more so than I've ever known. And that's not just because I'm getting older and because I'm meeting more people. The generation that's coming up, the Zennials, if you will, love the idea of being a marketing or technology freelancer. And the challenge that that creates is that you have to really be able to market yourself. You have to understand what your value is. You have to understand how to set yourself apart. And the competition is simply more abundant than it used to be. Really simple example of that. If I post on LinkedIn right now and I say, hey, I'm looking for a freelance graphic designer, I'm going to get, and not because I'm popular. If you look at my posts, I really don't have much engagement at all, right? So imagine it multiplied. But I'm going to get probably 50 or 60 people that are going to send me DMs or comment and say that they want that job. And one of the things that I'm going to notice as I go through their portfolios, some of them are really just at the beginning of their design journey, which is a great thing, right? We've all been at the beginning of a journey, but because of the availability, I can be very, 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 very selective with who I want to work with. So that's a little bit of a tangent perhaps, but freelancers, lots of good things about that trend towards the gig economy, lots of challenging things too. It also impacts the FTE, or the more commonly the full-time employees, right? So if I'm a full-time employee, the move towards the gig economy impacts me in a variety of ways. Probably the one that is most interesting to most employees is that my wages and the expectations of what I'm going to produce are now being stacked against or alongside of a freelancer, right? And more companies are moving towards fractional or freelance talent. Fractional is just really, in many ways, another way of saying part-time, right? So that means that finding companies that value marketing enough to pay a full-time employee what that full-time employee may deserve or need is also getting challenging, or more challenging than it has before. I talked to probably 500 or 600 individuals in the marketing, technology, creative space each year, and the amount of them that are applying for hundreds of jobs is fascinating, just because of that oversaturation. Full-time workers are also within that. They're trying to figure out how to stay on top of the things that they're good at, right? So that's not an easy thing to balance if you're out there seeking a new opportunity. My recommendation to most of my friends is, if you have a marketing job and it's full-time and they're treating you pretty well, stay. it's not necessarily the best time in the world to jump into the marketplace. Okay, so what about the other side? What about the people hiring? Maybe you own a business, maybe you run a team, or maybe you've just been given the job of finding someone to do the marketing at your company. The people hiring are also experiencing this trend in both sunshine ways and rain cloud ways. We are in a children's room. I feel like this metaphor works here. So on the sunshine side, if I'm hiring right now, I could be very selective, lots of availability. But what about the rain? Well, first of all, as someone who's been doing this for almost a decade, it is harder than ever to figure out what people actually know how to do versus what they are just saying that they know how to do. And add into that the growing complexity and specialization that's occurring within the marketing space, right? I'm a marketing generalist. If you ask me, hey, Tim, if I give you $100 million, can you go run TikTok ads for me? I would say for $100 million, absolutely I can. I'll go learn how to do that, right? Because marketers are people usually that are very good at learning. But that doesn't mean that that's my specialty. That doesn't mean that you should be giving me money for that necessarily. Because of this challenge, what I have been encouraging most hiring managers to do, where possible, where there's not corporate structure that prohibits innovation in this regard, is to stop interviewing and to start doing paid test projects. So when I want to hire for something, I find a project that isn't necessarily in need of being delivered in a super specific timeline. I write it up. I find the 3 or 4 best candidates that I can reach out to or that reach out to me, and I pay them. Critical piece. I pay them because their time is a resource. And then based on how that project unfolds, the deliverables, the results, but most importantly for me, the communication and their ability to navigate a hybrid workforce, that's how I make my decision. And larger companies are moving in this direction in similar fashion, but more along the lines of you have to do internships, you have to do an apprenticeship, you have a 3-month contract before we offer you a full-time opportunity, those sorts of things. So if you're hiring for marketers right now, there's a lot to navigate. Further reading. If you want a book that you can put on your shelf and think about reading and maybe even open someday, this one's a great one. Humans as a Service. So this movement towards basically human capital, us all being our own product in a way. I don't necessarily love the personal brand movement, but this is a really good read if you're hoping to know more about the shift that has been happening and will continue to happen towards the gig economy. And if you're looking for a tool, maybe you're managing a freelancer, maybe you're managing a little team, or maybe you just like new toys. Asana is my go-to project management platform. One of the things you'll find true for most marketers is that they all have a project management platform that they're really passionate about, and they think it's better than all the other ones. And if you talk to them enough, you start to wonder if they actually work for that company, but they don't. That is my feeling towards Asana. There are others out there, such as ClickUp and Basecamp and others, but I think Asana is the best, and of course, I feel very strongly about that. Why does this tool matter? How does it relate to the trend of the gig economy? As you manage a more complicated part-time workforce, you will quickly learn that if you're deploying marketing projects without some sort of project management tool, you're going to get lost really fast. And more importantly, they're going to get lost really fast, right? So I'm working, for example, with a very talented graphic designer and I have them contracted at 20 hours a week, well, they probably have 2 or 3 other projects that they're also doing. So my ability to project manage them and to provide a clear experience for them in the digital space becomes really, really important. And actually will likely factor in some way, shape, or form to their decision about whether or not they even want to keep working with me, right? If everything they get is a pile of emails with attachments, they're probably not going to call me back, even if I offer to pay them more. Okay, that was the first trend. Deep breath. The next trend I want to cover is content exhaustion. I don't know about you, but I'm tired, very, very tired. Most of the time, no matter how much sleep I get, I just can't seem to catch up with all the content in the world. Now, when marketing first moved towards social media 15 years ago, or whatever it was at this point, I was leading talks like this, I'm embarrassed to say, and the conversation was often around like, how many posts are you posting on Facebook? Oh, you guys are only posting 5 posts a week? You are missing out on a very big opportunity. You should be posting 20 a week. Oh, and you should post them at exactly 12 o'clock and 7 o'clock. Those are the best times, right? And at that point in time, that was the ecosystem, that was the world. However, as you have likely noticed, the amount of content that exists on the internet and therefore on our phones is overwhelming. And when content marketing really began to evolve, what many marketers ended up doing was focusing on quantity over quality. Sometimes that was due to misguided understandings around what SEO was and how to best achieve rankings on Google. And sometimes it was just because we like to talk and we forget that not everyone else wants to listen all the time. This trend is impacting society as a whole, but for the case of our conversation, I want to unpack how it is impacting a few different characters relevant to our space. So the first character I want to talk about, business development. Maybe you prefer to think of that along the word sales, and recruiters. So maybe I'm trying to sell something, maybe I'm trying to build relationships, maybe I'm trying to hire someone. How does content exhaustion impact me? When I think of this character set, I think not so much about the social media feed, although that certainly has relevancy as well. I think about the individual messages that I'm sending. Now, one of the things that technology and marketing have made it possible to do, which is, of course, added to this noise, is to automate mass messages, right? We all are familiar with the overflowing spam folder at this point. To cut through that noise, you could do something really, really simple that might actually blow your mind. You can write a custom message to someone. You can know enough about that individual. You can take enough time to maybe pull up their social media profile or talk to someone that knows them, and you can actually figure out who they are, where they come from, what they do, and you could take the effort to actually customize a message. And I say that with a little bit of sarcasm because marketers have moved towards mass messaging, right? The simplest example in this space, I don't know if you're on LinkedIn, but if you're like me, you open your direct message inbox and you have about 80,000 messages. Of course, that's an exaggeration, but you have a lot of messages that go like this. Hi, Dave. I've never met you before in my entire life. Do you want to give me $10,000 for an amazing idea? Here's a link to my calendar. And I look at it and I think, who is this person? This is a transactional message. This isn't a relationship. this person doesn't even know me. They're just setting up an automated bot and they're just spamming the shit out of the entire LinkedIn platform. So the way to cut through that noise is just to not do that, to just actually take the time to build relationships. It's not necessarily rocket science. On the recruiting side, the way that I see that showing up is the mass rejects. Maybe you've applied for jobs in the last year or two, or maybe you know someone that has. If you are applying for jobs in the creative technology or marketing space, if you submit 100 applications, it won't be surprising if you get 99 automatic rejections back. And those are so devastating. Those sorts of automated messages are so devastating for so many reasons. Often the person doing the hiring doesn't even know that those messages are happening. It's not unheard of for them to be entirely unaware. You got an automated rejection email? I didn't send that. Oh, there's a box on the software that I forgot to uncheck. Who knew? There's no one more important to your organization than the people that are either working within it or that think highly enough of it to want to work for it. So the way that they experience you really does matter, right? Taking time even just to customize the automated message and to say, hey, this is an automated message. I have 5 hours a week and 6 million job applications. I care about you as a human, but I cannot write a custom message to you. Thank you for applying, right? Just be honest. They're going to know anyways. What about the content marketers? How does this content exhaustion trend? I laugh because these are the people that are responsible for it, right? The content marketers are the ones to blame. Most simply put, it's quality over quantity, right? It used to be that quantity worked, but it doesn't anymore. If you are a content marketer, your goal should not be to get on as many channels as possible. Please stop talking to me about omni-channel if you're a small business. That just is not real. That's not how the world actually works. If you are a content marketer, you need to be thinking about how to differentiate your content from those other competitors and the content that they're putting out. How do you add value? How do you go above and beyond to create meaningful conversations and educate and invite into community instead of just saturating on repeat, right? And the content itself, when I think of content, I'm often thinking, and maybe you're like me, I'm thinking of like the writing, the blog, the article, whatever it might be. Don't forget about how important the design is. In a world where most everyone has started to figure out how to use Canva templates, there's nothing wrong with Canva. Canva is a great tool. But where it's so accessible, you'll start to notice a trend if you pull up a few different social media profiles for businesses in the same space. You'll start to see, all of their posts, not only is the written part pretty similar, but the images they're using are all the same. They're using the same design templates, right? So the great thing about that is that it's easier to stand out in many ways than it used to be. You just have to actually do some legwork and flex your creative skills, and you will rise above the fold. What I would really encourage you to do is to go read this book, Building Brand Communities. Brands are still extremely powerful, and I think communities are the present and future of marketing in many ways. When it comes to putting this into action, if you are maybe you're a marketer, right? And you're like, okay, Tim, that was all great, blah, 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 blah. But how do I figure out what I should be posting about? You could do research. There's a bunch of different tools out there that do this exact sort of thing. I really like SCM Rush just because I've been using it for a long time, and that tends to be how those things go. But what would I do with a tool like this? Maybe I sell auto parts, and I'm trying to figure out what consumers want to know that isn't already being talked about. Where's the window of opportunity? Where's the blue ocean, right? This tool makes it really easy just to figure out like, oh, everyone is searching for this right now, but I don't see many people posting about it. Methinks that's what I should speak towards, right? So do absolutely leverage the power of data, but I also want to underline here that tools don't solve problems, people do. And there's nothing quite as valuable as a good old-fashioned little focus group. If you've got a list of 300 customers or whatever it might be, and you're wondering what they want to see posted, what kind of content they would find to be valuable, maybe go speak to them. I bet they'll happily share. The third and final trend that I want to unpack, I'm going to check the clock here. Oh, good. The trauma-informed lens. Trauma, 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 trauma. As some of you may remember, the world shut down not too long ago for this thing called COVID. And I believe from a sociological and psychological perspective that COVID was a collective trauma. And what I mean by that is that it had a very dramatic impact on almost all individuals in some way, shape, or form, right? That amount of change is just undeniably going to impact the way that humans are showing up in the world. Tangentially, this is very obvious in that people are more reactive than they've ever been before, in my experience of them, and perhaps yours as well. And polarization is at a fascinating and alarming high, right? The internet comment wars have taken on really a new bravado at times. So what do we do in a world where our consumers, our customers, our clients, our employees, our coworkers, whatever they might be, what do we do in a world where those individuals are still often recovering from a trauma response? How does that impact? So if you are a marketing team leader, or frankly, if you're in charge of people or managing people in any way, shape, or form, more now than ever before, you really need to make sure that you're implementing a trauma-informed lens with how you communicate to your team. And if you want an example of how I've gotten this wrong, an easy one to share, I really like to work Sunday nights. I don't know why. I just get excited about the week ahead, and I can't sleep, and I stay up sometimes till 1, and I get some work done, and then I take my Friday off. Well, a few years ago, during COVID, when I was managing a team of 13, it did not occur to me that if I'm an employee getting a message on a Sunday night, and maybe I have that on my phone because during the week I use whatever tool that might be, it's Microsoft Teams or Slack or whatever, it did not occur to me that those messages might be showing up on people's phones and causing them stress. It simply did not occur to me. It also did not occur to me that my excitement might be perceived as anxiety or pressure or whatever word you might want to throw at it. And suddenly, I found myself having a talk with my leadership team about something they called the Sunday Evening Scaries, which didn't sound like a good book to read, although I was very intrigued by the title. That is just a really specific example of how if you don't take the trauma that the individuals you're collaborating with are experiencing if you're not taking that into account, you're having untold damaging impacts on your business and on your professional career. How do you solve for that if you're managing a marketing team or a sales team or whatever it might be? This is just a really simple framework. Maybe you've seen something like it. Observe, hear the feelings, make your request, and then listen to the needs. If you're in a relationship, you're hopefully navigating this all the time with that individual. If not, we can tell because it's showing up in other areas of your life. But being able to listen and respond and meet people where they're at is just really critical. And it always has been, but I think that it's worth acknowledging. Not only have we just come out of a pandemic, but we are also in a world where communication exists in ways that it just never has before, right? We were chatting a little bit before about how there's a family reunion happening. And so while you're here, you're getting these messages about a family reunion. And that is just a micro look at every person's day to day, right? The thing that is most important for you might be the least important and the most stressful for them. Okay, moving a little bit out of the human management piece of that. What if I'm a user experience specialist? What if I make the website? Maybe I'm in charge of like the way the homepage works. How does this impact me? Well, if I'm doing my job well, I'm taking it into consideration in really practical ways. An example of that, I'm really excited about your business. You gave me a business card. I go and I get in my car and I'm on my phone and I'm thinking, oh, I really need what that person does. I type in the URL and as soon as I open it, pop up. Do you want to join my email list? No, I don't want to join your email list. I want to know what you do. I want to speak to you. I want to learn about you. Oh, and now I'm on my phone and I broke my fingers and I'm having a really hard time closing this stupid pop-up. Whose idea was this? If you're not taking the user experience journey into consideration and using a trauma-informed lens, you are absolutely causing needless harm to your brand and to your relationships. The simple reality is that I'm already stressed, and the more notifications, the more friction that I experience trying to engage with you and your services, the less likely I am going to be to actually follow through. And that trend has been since the beginning of the internet, right? It doesn't help that so many of us have undiagnosed and untreated ADHD. The neurotypicals may not fully appreciate just how angry I might get if I can't check out in 1 or 2 clicks. I will abandon entire life decisions in the moment that I am experiencing that. And it is fun, but it's also very true. I was searching for an apartment the other week, and I loved this apartment so much. It was everything that I needed. It even had a pool. But when I went to do the application, it wasn't designed with me in mind. It wasn't working for me. And by the time I had tried 2 times to submit it and I couldn't, I had deleted the application and decided I hate that apartment and I'm never going back to it. And when they called me 6 times, I assure you I did not answer. Another way this could be taken into consideration when it comes to user experience, please, please, please stop marketing in the old way. What is the old way of marketing? The old way of marketing is pressure-based, limited quantity, fear-driven, right? And when I think of pressure-based online, I think of the only 6 spots left. And then you scroll down and you read some more and you think, really, there's only 6 spots left? That doesn't make sense. It says they have 60 classes and that they have rolling admissions, but they only have 6 spots left. And if I don't do it now, my life and my opportunity will come to an end, right? Psychologically, that may have a short-term profit margin, but it does damage to your overall brand and the relationship. When I think about content marketers, I think about this more in the headline arena. The 60,000 ways you will be hacked tomorrow if you don't buy our IT services sort of headlines, right? And the challenge with marketing in many ways, the reason that, or at least I think a large part of why it's trended towards more and more fear mongering, if you will, is that we have the data, right? If I put out a picture of a cute puppy and I put out a picture of my product, I know that you're clicking on the cute puppy more often, right? I have that data, but that doesn't mean that that's actually helping the brand or helping me achieve a long-term client relationship. It just means that I got some dopamine and that I feel better about what I did that day. So if you're a content marketer, you can shift from writing your headlines towards fear and instead focus more on invitational questions, right? How could you improve your security? Well, that's not as fun as Russia is hacking your computer and here's why. But my dopamine levels stay a little bit more steady. I don't feel like I'm about to have a panic attack if I don't click on the right thing, right? This is just a simple example, one that I think that you can relate to because it has gotten overwhelming sometimes. It feels like there is a whole group of marketers that are convinced that the best way to get you to buy is to scare the shit out of you. And I just don't think that that's actually a good long-term strategy for your brand or for your mission. What would you read? This is an oldie but a goodie, Nonviolent Communication. This has been, so the other 2 books, I can't speak as passionately towards, although I do encourage you to look at them. But this book has been highly impactful on my own journey as a leader. I keep a copy in my bag sometimes to remember some of the things that it suggests. It's a great read. And most importantly, for people like me, it's a great skim. I assure you I've never read it cover to cover, but lots of great skimming happens within its pages. And really, it's just all about like, how do I speak and communicate in a way that considers the fact that everyone has had diverse experiences, has diverse identities, has diverse needs. How do I create an equitable conversation with each and every person, whether it's online or offline? Certainly an easier task to talk about than to achieve. How would I achieve this? Well, if you don't have Grammarly, if nothing else, leave this today. Go get this tool. When Grammarly first came out, I remember their ads all over YouTube, and I remember hating them. I remember thinking, it's just a spell check. I don't need spell check. I already know I don't know how to spell. And sure, it does have those sorts of tools within it, as the name may suggest. But what I love about it, and there are other tools that do this too, it has a tone analyzer. So the way that I use Grammarly, I think, is most fun to imagine when I'm writing an angry email to a customer service representative about something that didn't ship on time, which of course is always life and death. If I don't get it overnight, what am I going to do? And I can type in the most angry email, and I just click a few buttons, and I watch this little face in the bottom right corner of my screen, and it goes from anger face to neutral to happy. And when I've reached happy, I know that I have processed the emotions in a way that are safe to share with others, and I can hit send. You may find other uses for this as well, such as making your text messages more romantic, but I highly recommend that you give it a try. It saves me all sorts of pain. And it fixes all those spelling errors too, but the tone is what I most enjoy. So with the purpose of making sure that there is space for conversation, as there are 7 million trends and 10 million examples that I skipped, I'm going to wrap it there and invite you to do one of two things. If you have a question about anything, I would love to hear it. And two, if you see a trend that was not covered or that was maybe connected but not spoken into in quite the way that you have in mind, I'd love to hear that too.
Thank you, Tim.
Two questions, and I think I speak for everyone here. So where did you come up with your friend Frank? And then how did you hurt your hand? So none of them actually have to do with the content, but
no, I love those. Those are both very relationally driven questions. Let's see. The hand was a scooter incident. I forgot that I wasn't 21 and I was going really fast on an electric scooter, and I suffered a delightful opportunity to learn about safety. And your friend Frank, where did that come from? I think that came from a brainstorm with a friend, and we were just kind of talking about how, like in marketing more so than some other industries, I know that there's similarities, of course, but in marketing much more than other industries, there's just so much bullshit, right? And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. A marketer's job in many ways can be summarized as taking whatever horrible thing is happening and figuring out how to make it not feel so horrible. I'm sure not all marketers would agree with that assessment, and I do mean that mostly, or at least a little bit, as a joke, right? But it's always about framing it, right? And I think marketers sometimes, because of that superpower, damage the ability of organizations to grow because they're not honest, right? And a really simple example, I think I used one of those like words that probably deserved more clarification, omni-channel. This is one of those like trendy words. If you Google 2024 trends, I bet half the articles will talk about omni-channel, which, like most words in marketing, was made up by marketers. And what omni-channel means is essentially you should be on everything all the time, and it should all work together, and you should be on Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok, and everything has to be connected, and you have to be fully present. That is an example of just utter bullshit. If I'm a small business owner and I have maybe $1,000 a month to spend on marketing, maybe I have 10 hours a week to spend on marketing. Maybe I'm doing it myself. Maybe I have the luxury of someone doing it for me. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I'm a small-time business owner and I have 3 full-time people. Omni-channel is a great example. That's just bullshit. Nobody has time to do that. And maybe I started to get on a rant. I caught myself. You asked me such a good question that I started cutting loose. What I'll just say is that I believe marketing needs to have a really honest conversation with itself. And I think that the best way to do that is just to be frank. A really frank thing that I would say to all of you is maybe none of you even need to do any of the things that I just mentioned. I don't know you and your business or your role well enough to make broad statements, but maybe what you need to do is go home and write like 20 thank you notes to people. I hear people still get mail. It's kind of crazy, but they do. Thank you for your question. That was very kind. I got lost on my excitement. My Adderall is still kicking back in from lunch.
Tell us about the agency that you had. What type of agency? You said you had 13, 15 people. Tell us about that and what you grew it into.
So Symposia still exists. It's based out of Holland. It was acquired by a friend who owned a VC firm, and it's growing, I believe, quite a bit. I'm no longer involved or connected in any way, shape, or form, but I grew that over the course of 9 years, and I would say a lot of it was just accident and lots of really amazing people, like amazing human beings, many of whom I still keep in touch with or at least keep track of. And it was really my journey through that agency that led to the creation of Frank, which is intended to be very niche. So although I enjoy like talking and teaching and would always do those things more if I had time, Frank has a very specific audience. So Frank, we work just with those sorts of companies that are in a highly iterative environment. Sometimes that might be a startup that has enough money to bring in external resources. And sometimes that might be a larger company that's creating a new division. But that chaos is where I function best. And the team that I'm building for Frank, which will intentionally be much smaller than the one that I had before, those individuals all fit that criteria too, because chaos is just not a place that all marketers, creatives, or technologists actually want to live. And what I like about the size of client that we work with is that the stage that they're at, really marketing is intertwined. Like you may have noticed that I used business development, communication, technology. I use some of these words almost interchangeably at times. And that is because when you're that size or when you're in that stage, they really are completely intertwined. If you came to me and said, hey, I'm starting a new business and I want to go spend 50 hours creating social media content, I would probably tell you that that was a silly choice more often than not. Where I think most businesses go wrong in that startup or iteration stage is that they forget to actually just like talk to people and have those conversations, which is always, in my experience, the quickest feedback loop towards growth. But yeah, thank you for asking. There's a lot of marketing agencies these days. I think that's a challenge as well. If you're trying to hire a marketing agency, a lot of times I'm just advising people because we don't fit with everyone or really that many people. A lot of times I'm just advising people on this is the agency that I would hire if I were in your shoes. And here are the things that I know about them that you should look out for and be excited about, and everywhere in between. Many agencies are, well, we're being recorded, but yes, there's lots to know.
As a follow-up to that, can you, from a business development standpoint, what recommendations would you make to somebody that's doing biz dev for an agency?
100%. Find the client that the team is most excited about or that you're personally most excited about. Ideally, there's some alignment between the two. Find that client, know everything about them and why you were able to help them succeed or why you're helping them succeed still, and make a Loom video and send it to 10 people that look just like that client, but that don't exist within the same geographical area as they do. Assuming that you're talking about a space where that would work, which could be presumptuous. But yeah, Loom videos are highly effective. If you look at the history of like marketing and advertising, it's, people like to call it disruption, right? But really it's just like, what's the new toy on the block, right? I used to get 60,000 messages that were all text, and now I'm getting some that are video. And guess which ones I'm most likely to open? The video, because I'm curious about it. And eventually that'll probably go away too. But by then the robots will have taken over, so it won't be a problem. But yeah, I highly encourage anyone who's in the B2B space to focus business development on LinkedIn, but not through content in the feed, although that certainly has value. I'm much more interested if you're at like a startup or a smaller scale organization. Not to say that they're interchangeable, but I'm much more interested when resources are limited in direct message conversations, and not the spam ones we talked about, but the meaningful dialogue, right? Like, how can I add value for you? Hey, here's a video of the 6 things that made me want to jump off a bridge when I looked at your website. Maybe you and I can have a conversation about how to stop people from jumping off bridges.
So I'm the director of business development for for Camel Emergency Water Removal, but we really talk to a lot of blue collar workers who hate
Are not on
technology,
LinkedIn.
and they're like, "Oh my God, this stuff! You're sending me text messages, you're interrupting."
Uh-huh.
I do a job that I intentionally don't want to see people.
Uh-huh.
In fact, I know they're in the home, but I'm just talking to a sink, and so
Uh-huh.
we're great. What is a great way to continue to market and connect with them that is beyond, say, like sending that direct message or
Yeah.
even pumping something up on any of the
Yeah.
social media forums?
Yeah. I love your question so much, and I'm fascinated by that space, which is growing rapidly. I think the best thing about your question is that you're really taking into consideration like what the audience actually wants, and that group they're a unique group, right? For me, in that situation, it becomes less about digital and more about offline, and it becomes, how do I create an experience? So the same things that have worked for hundreds of years are still working. We're just calling them different things and doing them in different ways, right? So lunch and learn has been around for a millennia at this point. Is there some sort of way, embracing the fact that none of them actually want to come to a lunch and learn either, because they're all overwhelmed and busy? Is there some sort of way to create that experience in a world where they don't have to do anything to get a hold of it, right? So maybe it's as simple as, and I'm making this up on the spot, so it could be a terrible idea, but maybe it's as simple as, here are the 15 businesses that we really want to be talking to. Is it B2B or is it B2C?
It'd be B2B and B2C.
B2B and B2C. Okay. So either way, here's a list of like the people that we most want to get the attention of. Maybe we'll go deliver lunch to them and give them an iPad with a video on it, right? How do I go out of my way to make an experience that they can digest easily and interact with easily? That crowd is, yeah, I've worked in that space, and they're hard to find too. Even getting the list to go find them is challenging. More often than not, it's good old fashioned, like, knocking on doors. Or if you're able to find the construction firms that maybe the contractors have a relationship with, because they tend to be relational when they are relational, they tend to go pretty deep with people. Kind of like the friend of a friend for credibility. But yeah, that's a very hard space. I would say, in my mind, those individuals and then healthcare workers are like the two where, if I was running that agency where we were taking on all sorts of different industries, those were the two industries where when people came to me, I went, oh, that's going to be a challenge. That's going to be hard, right? Because they don't want the things that other people want. They are doing what they're doing, like you said, to not have to deal with that. They do tend to like toys though, like maybe it's like a really like the Ox coffee maker for their work site or something like that. But yeah, you've got a challenge. I don't know if that's as helpful as it could be. I'd have to think about it more. But you're absolutely right in thinking like digital would be a waste. Just, be a waste. Maybe unless you're creating like a community that somehow reaches their families. I know a lot of the family members are probably still on social, but that would be a much lower priority.
Yeah, and/or their bosses or their owners don't, they're either in a truck or they're doing their work. And they don't want them on anything either. So that removes them. lot of conversations with owners like, hey, love that they love to talk to you,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't be here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking away from my bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love the
Mhm.
open brainstorming. It's cool to see that mind session going back and forth and getting those different resources out there. I think, Tim, you gave a lot of helpful insight into those very different trends to look at. I did not know exactly where we were going, and I learned quite a bit myself. And did you guys learn a lot as well? Awesome. Well, Tim, we definitely want to thank you for coming all this way and giving us such a wonderful and insightful presentation. Everyone, please be sure to follow MIpreneur, that's MIpreneur on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We need to get those LinkedIn numbers up as well. And please join the community. Help us get all of our people from Meet Me and Facebook into the community and creating conversations just like this right there online. So again, thank you all for coming and have a great rest of your day.